Good morning, brothers and sisters. Thanks, Joshua, for great emceeing so far. So, yeah, last week we explored how to spiritually grow. And one secret that I shared at that time was that the best thing for growth is making a commitment. And today I'd like to share about one of our greatest commitments that we can make, and that is the commitment to love. So today, as you know, is the Valentine's Day, and I felt like this was a very opportune time to share about love. And I wanted to start with sharing on some common misconceptions about love. One of the most common misconceptions about love is that it's primarily a feeling. The problem with love being primarily a feeling is that feelings change moment to moment. That's why we hear, stories about heartbreak and how, sometimes we fall into love and then maybe the next day we fall out of love. Even the song, I remember thinking like the topic was, "What is love?" And there's that song that goes, "Baby, don't hurt me no more." But there's a lot of pain and confusion, I think, when it comes to love. And one of the biggest challenges is understanding that love is not just a feeling, but it requires commitment. And again, feelings aren't wrong, feelings are very real. But in order for love to last, there needs to be commitment, and that needs to be primary over feeling. It's kind of the difference between dating or having a fling versus committing to love through marriage. I remember one time this was during my college years, I had roommates, and every weekend they would be partying, and I would be sitting in my bed trying to go to bed on time because I have to get up early. And I remember one time I was already tucked in bed, and my roommate just like knocks on the door, and he's like, "Now, can I talk with you?" And I was like, "Okay." And so he came in and he sat down on my bed, and he just started like confessing, and he was like, "I just want to be happy." And he started sharing about his troubles with his girlfriend, and how his feelings are going up and down and everywhere. And I really didn't have much experience in that realm, so I didn't know what to say, but he wanted some advice. So I tried to share at that time how it's important to focus on himself and his ability to love more than seeking to find the right person. So some of that is what we're going to be talking about today, but that's one of the common challenges with our understanding of love in society, is that if we base it just on feeling, then it's going to be a roller coaster. The second misconception about love is that we focus on, it tends to be how someone makes me feel versus how I want to make others feel. So the problem is, if love is based on how your partner makes you feel, then that means both sides are looking for something to receive. And it might be good for a certain time, but if the focus is all about how you make me feel, and both sides are feeling that way, there's a much higher probability that it's not going to work out. Because your needs may not be met on both sides equally. So in order for making love last, it's really important that the primary motive is really, how can I make my partner feel better? So it needs to be other-centered rather than self-centered. And this is also a very common misconception about love is, "Oh, I feel love. I'm in love," means that this person, you're dependent on someone making you feel good. But if you're really committed to loving, regardless of how that person makes you feel, you're committed to really focusing on making the other person feel good. If both sides have that kind of perspective and commitment, then there's a much higher probability for that relationship to last. A third misconception about love is that it's all about immediate affection or chemistry. It's kind of like it's based on that moment. It's like love at first sight. Your eyes meet and you get these fluttering feelings in your belly, and that's what love is, right? The challenge with that concept of what love is that it really makes love dependent on sheer luck. And what that means, and also immediate satisfaction. So then if that's what love is, then people are going to wander around the world trying to find that one person that gives you that kind of feeling, which is fine and romantic in one sense, but it also puts you in a pretty challenging position. Also, it discourages the real effort that's required to really being able to make love work. Love is really requires effort. It's like training yourself. It's not something that happens automatically. It's something that really requires long-term investment. So it's kind of like the difference of playing the lottery and hoping that you hit the jackpot versus being responsible to save and invest in your 401k. So these are some common misunderstandings, misconceptions about what love is that sometimes we get bombarded with through media. But it's really important. If we want to find love, we need to really understand what real love is and what it isn't. So today I wanted to share about the value of the marriage blessing, which is a cornerstone of our Heavenly Parents Holy Community. We really honor the marriage blessing, and part of the value of the marriage blessing is that it naturally helps align the priorities for lasting love. There's an emphasis on commitment over feeling, really living for the sake of your partner versus for yourself, and making daily effort and regular effort to really make love work, make the relationship work, rather than hoping for and finding the right person and gaining immediate satisfaction. So how is the marriage blessing different than what's out there in general in terms of relationship? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that it's about preparing to love rather than seeking to be loved. So growing up, I had many workshops where young people gathered, and we had this kind of education to help us prepare as young singles. And there was a tradition in our community of no dating. And instead of finding the one, you had to focus on developing your character and becoming the one that someone would want to really be with. There were some challenges there, of course. Many people wondered why I wasn't dating, and there were some social pressures to do that. One time I was invited to the prom, and I think I told that story already. So there were some definite growing, challenges growing up because of that commitment. But on the other hand, there were some benefits. I know that many of my peers had to go through so many emotional ups and downs during their high school years, which was an important time where I was able to focus on personal development, my studies, and other things that helped me prepare well for the future. Another really key difference about the marriage blessing is that there's a lot more, it's a family affair. It requires parental involvement. And instead of choosing for myself or by myself, there's a much more collaborative effort through your parents or a blessing advisor, and also including Mother and Father Moon. Earlier on, they played a big role in helping to introduce our partners to each other. So when I was preparing for the marriage blessing myself, this was already many, many years ago. I was on a missionary training program. I was on my second year, and they asked the participants, who wants to go to the next marriage blessing? I was 20 at that time, and the next year was going to be the year 2000. Also, I was going to turn 21 that same month. And I felt very strongly that this is the one that I'm going to go to. Since I'm a numbers guy, that was part of it. And as I was thinking about that, they gathered us all in a room and they encouraged us. Actually, they discouraged us from going to the marriage blessing because they knew that it required a high level of commitment. So they asked us many questions. At the beginning, all of us were there, and they asked who wants to go to blessing. And of course, I raised my hand, and so did almost everyone in the room. But that they went on and said, well, what if they're not attractive, or you don't find them attractive? Or what if they're disabled in some way? And they kept going on and on about, what the chances of them not being who we expect or who we want. And of course half the hands went down. But I was one of those that kept my hand up because I really felt this was the time for me to go. So as part of that process, they did have certain requirements, and one of the requirements was to write a confession of all your past regrets and mistakes, and to share that with your parents. And that was really terrifying for me. I had to do a lot of prayer and reflection and support from my mentors to really muster the courage to be able to do that. But fortunately, with that kind of support, I was able to call up my parents, and as part of that, offer that. And fortunately, it was received well. I appreciate my dad for really accepting it and thanking me for sharing. And I felt this whole weight lifted up from my shoulders. So this was a really key aspect of restoring this kind of trust with my own parents, and really cleaning all my past so that I can go into the relationship really with a pure and open heart with no regrets. That was fine. And then as we went on, there was a process where there was at that time, since there were many people and it was international, we had to submit our profiles and our images, our pictures for for matching for our prospective matches. So I was in a training center in Chicago, and the one challenge I faced was the photographer was an amateur photographer, and we had Sunday best clothes, or not really so great. So when I looked at my profile picture, I felt it didn't quite represent the best of who I was. And that was, I remember one struggle was, how could Father and Mother Moon help identify the perfect person for me through this kind of photo? But I struggled a bit with that. Fortunately, my mentor at that time, he shared that when Father and Mother Moon goes through the process of identifying potential partners, they really go into deep prayer and ask for guidance from God and spirit world, and really tap into the collective insight and intuition to identify the best person. When I heard that, a scene from Mulan came to mind, where I don't know if everyone remembers that scene, but there's Mushu and the ancestors of Mulan really encouraging the Mulan to get married with the main character and so on and so forth. So I felt somewhat relieved that there was that together with my ancestors and trusting that God can work through Father and Mother Moon, and that my ancestors were involved in that process, I felt reassured that really the right person would be selected or prepared. So that was another challenge. And then as I was flying to Korea, where we had this whole blessing ceremony, I remember watching a movie on the plane, and the movie that came up was The Wedding Planner. And for those who've seen that movie, you know that there's a beautiful scene where J-Lo actually asks her father, what is love? And the father explains that, it's that he had an arranged marriage and that it was tough at first, but that you kind of learn and grow to love each other. And I thought it was such a beautiful scene, and I was like, wow, this is the perfect movie for getting ready for my own marriage experience. But as Hollywood goes, a handsome doctor sweeps in and picks her up, and they get and then the dad even says a line like, I just want you to be happy, so go ahead and marry who you like, kind of like that. And then they go off into the sunset or something like that. And I remember being in a state of deep shock. I don't know why it didn't occur to me until then, that moment. But I'm on a plane going to Korea, and I'm wondering, wait a minute. If God is my parent and he just wants me to be happy, yeah, why can't I just choose whomever and marry whomever I want to based on who I like or my own preferences? Not the best thought to have on the way to getting married. Well, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced cold feet before they get married. I think I had kind of similar experience. But in deep prayer, I asked, and the thought that occurred to me was, yes, I could go and find whoever I wanted to get married with. And I'm sure, we could probably create a good family and so on and so forth. But there was something special about having God work through Mother and Father Moon to identify a person for me. And I felt like God really was asking me to love this person on God's behalf. And so I felt like, I really wanted to go through with this for the sake of also not just my own happiness, but for God's intention and to parents in my whole community who are involved in this process as well. So yeah, quite a challenge, a series of challenges, but I felt like each one was a test of helping me break through in my relationship with my parents, in my relationship with trusting that God can work through Father and Mother Moon, and also really a breakthrough in my trust with God, really believing that he has my best interest in mind in this process. So yeah, I really feel that this marriage blessing preparation helps everyone to prepare to love rather than seeking to be loved. Another key aspect I want to mention about the marriage blessing is that God's love is a central part of the relationship. And what I mean by that is that typically in marriage, it's based on, your relationship with your partner, and also sometimes with your families and in-laws and things like that. But in the marriage blessing, God is a very key and important aspect of our relationship. One story I want to share is we had my wife, she asked for having a wedding after the blessing. And I remember, thinking to myself, like, why have a wedding? We already got blessed in Korea. But she was persistent, and I kind of finally agreed to do it. And I'm really grateful that we did. It was a beautiful experience. We had, 100 people or so there, and everyone was helping out. And I just remember there were two parts where she really was moved to tears, and I had to really think about why that was. And the first part was when we were doing the marriage vows. And in those vows, we said that, as usual, like the I do statements. Do you hereby take this woman to be your beloved wife? And of course, I said I do. But I remember seeing her really cheer up at the time, and for me, it took me a while to kind of realize why. But for me, I felt like I had already made this commitment to God. But for her, it was really important that she could also receive and hear that my commitment was to her as well. And I realized, since that's that's just as important. It's not just about my faith in God. It's really about practicing my faith. In fact, the purpose of faith is about loving, about. So you kind of miss the point if I'm being faithful, but I'm not actually loving my spouse. And through this experience, I could see that really she's helped me to grow in many ways, and to really realize these deeper truths about the purpose of faith being love. The other part where she really teared up was when I had prepared a poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing; it might embarrass her too much. But I did prepare for 40 days to think about things that I appreciated about her. And as part of the ceremony, again, we had testimonies. She also played as part of a quartet. It was very beautiful. And when it came my turn to share a few words, I shared from a poem that I made based on those appreciation points. And I just want to read a few lines, because I feel like this is what kind of one of the things I learned through our relationship in those first 4 years. So this is titled, "You Are So Beautiful." And being me, I kind of characterized into external characteristics, internal characteristics, effects on me and my hope. But I'm just going to read a few lines here. This is addressed to her. "You are like a child, pure of heart. You are beloved by God. You like things that are simple, not gaudy or flamboyant. You are very stubborn, but maybe not as much as me. You are so beautiful. Nothing brings me more joy than your smile. You have been so patient with me. I love to tuck you into bed at night, and I love it even more tucking in myself next to you. You are very sensitive to insincerity. You have helped me become more honest with my faith. I realize that being able to embody one's faith requires so much more than just practicing it. I love challenge, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not worried about getting bored with you. You can be mean sometimes, but I can handle mean, and I love you." So that was part of the poem that I prepared for that. And, a key part of that, when I was preparing for that, I realized that the whole point of our relationship is to be channels of God's love to each other. God depends on us to be able to channel God's love to our partners. And so really many times when I faced challenge in our relationship, I always went back to this point that God is depending on me to express God's love to her, and that has really helped me get over some of the challenges that we all face in our relationships. So the third significance or distinction of the marriage blessing is that it contributes, there's an intention to contribute to world peace through the marriage blessing. That the marriage that we're doing has a greater vision. It's not just about our happiness or our families. There's an intention to model a way that can contribute to world peace. So I want to read a few passages that really articulate this well. This is from Father Moon about the blessing. We cannot establish the ideal of heaven without marriage and the family. In the Unification Church, the purpose for all the good men and good women receiving the blessing is to build the ideal of the kingdom of heaven. The cross-cultural marriage blessing is by far the best way to restore humanity to become the children of God. Grandparents from enemy nations or religions will unite through the beautiful grandchildren they share in common. This one's from the Mother of Peace. For more than 30 years, Father Moon and I have been promoting harmony between nationalities, races, and religions through the marriage blessing. And one example here, through Korean-Japanese marriage blessings, we have broken down the barriers between these two nations and their peoples. We have done the same between Germany and France and many other people of former enemy nations. So I want to stop here to just share really the essence behind those statements, that the marriage blessing was designed to help people go beyond their own nationalities, their own cultures, even their own religions, and to really bring together the family, the different nations and families and cultures into one global family. That if we were to really do that, then the children of those unions will automatically be the best representation of the unity between those two nations. So, Korea and Japan still has many challenges in terms of, political and national relations, but more than any other community, our community has connected people through marriage of Koreans and Japanese together. Those children naturally represent the unity between those two nations. So by really encouraging these international blessings, we're helping the whole global family literally become related to each other and become like one family under God. Now, there are a little bit deeper points I just want to touch briefly before we wrap up today. And that is why Mother and Father Moon introduced this blessing. And there's a particular motivation that I want to touch on. Marriage is common in all cultures and all different faiths, but there's also a particular reason why Mother and Father Moon introduced this. So let's read. The era in which the blessing is given is the most important time. It is a time when God's wishes can finally be fulfilled and his grief of the past 6,000 years can be resolved. It is also the time when the wishes of Jesus, who came to earth as the Son of God for all humanity, can be fulfilled. Actually, let me go back to the first point. I don't want to go too deeply into this, but a big part of why Father and Mother Moon introduced the blessing was to address God's sorrowful heart. From the very beginning, God wanted all of his children to create beautiful families centered on God's love. But from the beginning, instead of really this filial piety, it was self-centered love that became the center of those relationships. So through the blessing, it was to restore this original relationship of heart between humanity and God. Next part, if we go down to the, I'm going to continue with the passage. What is Jesus's wish after 2,000 years of effort? It is for the marriage of the Lamb. What is the marriage of the Lamb? It is the blessing. In order to have the marriage feast, the bride must come in front of the bridegroom. That is the consummation of Christianity. Therefore, without passing through Christianity, you cannot enter heaven. So, as you know, Father Moon, he received a message straight directly from Jesus. And there was a request for continuing this mission. And part of that mission was to fulfill the prophecy of the marriage of the Lamb and go beyond on the foundation of individual salvation, which Jesus was able to bring, to really bring about family level salvation through one son and one daughter centered on God coming together as a couple and really being able to represent God here on earth and share this marriage blessing as a model for all of humanity. And that was a big part of the motivation of why Father Mother Moon introduced the marriage blessing, was to respond to Jesus's request and to complete or bring it to the next level of the family level salvation. And finally, moreover, it is the moment when people can truly love for the first time since their creation and receive respect, honor, and joy from the rest of creation. On that day, all evil will disappear, and we will usher in a new era with the bright rays of the ascending sun. Nature will rejoice, everything in the universe will dance with joy, and we will welcome a bright new morning, the new morning of victory. It's so beautiful. Just the poetry in this is really moving. But Father Moon is saying in this statement that the blessing is also to restore humanity to the original kind of level of heart so that all of creation can also relate with humanity in the proper way. So there's the biblical quote where it says that creation is waiting in travail for the Son of Man. So really the part of the purpose of this blessing is that if we can restore our original hearts and include God in all of our relationships, starting with our relationship with our spouse, then we will become, God's family centered on God's love. And naturally, we would also extend that to all of the environment, all of other God's creation, and take care of this world as God intended us to. So in summary, what is love? I just want to emphasize that it's really a commitment versus a feeling. Again, both are important, but in terms of priorities, the priority is commitment, and the feeling is there as well. You need both, but commitment is priority. Second, that love is for the sake of others, primarily, versus for the sake of myself. And finally, that love requires effort. It's not just luck. It's not just chance. It's not just finding the right person in that moment. It's really about developing your capacity to love. It requires effort like anything else, like studying math or working out. Loving requires effort. And so I just want to really emphasize that true love or real love requires effort. And as for the marriage blessing, really some key points about the distinction is that we're really focused on preparing people to love rather than seeking to be loved. That God is a part of the Trinity of the relationship between husband and wife, and that the marriage blessing has an intention of contributing to world peace. In one sense, getting blessed in the marriage blessing is like getting married into God's family, where God is like the head of the family, like the godfather, and there's always challenges in families. There's always the crazy ones and things like that. But the point is that through the blessing, we all become part of that family. And none of us are perfect, but everyone who receives the marriage blessing knows that we're all trying and working towards the ideal. And despite our differences in opinion and perspectives, even politics or religion, we know that we are part of the same family. And that's what gives us hope for creating a peaceful world. So